Hello everyone, welcome to GENIX-JS, a YouTube channel dedicated to teaching you what you need to know to get started with front-end web development. And in today's video, we'll be looking at CSS. After writing some CSS, I'll need us to open our editor. From the last video, we installed Visual Studio Code. If you don't have Visual Studio Code, there's a link in the description below to download VS Code. It's very straightforward. So now, the first thing I need you to do after downloading VS Code is to click on the Start button on your system. If you're a Mac user, just click on your search, your Spotlight search, and search for VS Code. So now I'll be typing VS Code. I will be opening up a new window. Click on New Window. So now here we have it. Our new window has been opened. So to create a new CSS file, it's pretty straightforward. But first you need an HTML file. And before you even create an HTML file, you need a folder. So I'm going to click on Open Folder. And in my desktop, I'm going to widen this a bit. In my desktop, I'm going to right click and then click on New and Folder, and then name this CSS, right? And then double click on it and then select Folder. Okay, so now you have CSS folder created. So before you create your CSS file, you need an HTML file where you can actually style the elements on. So to do that, we're going to click on New, this new folder here. Let me zoom this in a little. Yes. So now you can cancel this, and then you're going to click on New, this new one here, and type index.html, because you can't style anything without an HTML file. So I said in the last video that there's a shortcut to create your boilerplate. So since we're not talking so much on HTML, we're not going to be writing the boilerplate from scratch. So what I need you to do is just hold your shift down, Windows, users, and click on one, and then you see this show up. Just click enter. So this generates the boilerplate for you, boilerplate code, so you don't have to waste time, writing it from scratch. For Mac users, just type exclamation mark and hit tab. It's the same thing. So I'm just going to change the name of this to CSS. And in today's video, we're going to be looking at the most basic properties of CSS, such as colors, such as background colors, such as fonts, and the rest of them like that as we go on in the video. In today's video, we're going to be looking at the most basic properties of CSS, such as the text properties, list properties, border properties, and fonts properties. But before we start writing any CSS to talk about these properties, what exactly is CSS and how do we get styling our HTML elements? Now, CSS can be styled. You can style your HTML element, your HTML document in three ways. You either use the inline CSS, the external CSS, or the internal CSS. So real quick, I'm going to create a div. Now this div, we're going to give this div an ID of wrapper. I'm going to talk about this as we go on, and then we create a paragraph and type this. This is a paragraph. So now we're going to run this with Live Server. I have a link in the description below to install Live Server as an extension. So I'm just going to right click on this and click on Live Server. So now after clicking on Open on Live Server, this opened up for me. This is a paragraph, exactly what we have here. So we're going to be putting this to the left. Okay, so now that we've already splitted our screen, we have our display and then we have our code base. Let's continue. So now this inline CSS is the first one we're going to be talking about. It's the most basic type of CSS that every web developer should understand. So now in inline CSS, you have your style embedded inside your HTML element, and the style is only available to that particular HTML element that it was styled with. So what do I mean? If I type style, there's a property called style, and then inside this property you can give it different styles. Let's give it a color of red. So now you see that I changed on the right side. So this is inline CSS. Inline CSS is only available to the element that has that style attribute. Only available to the element that has that style attribute. So that's what inline CSS is used for. So now the next one that we have is internal CSS. An internal CSS is CSS that is also inside your HTML document, but is not directly embedded into the HTML element. What do I mean? In your head tag, which contains the data and information about your website, which are not seen, your style tag is meant to be inside that head if you're using internal CSS. So now we can create a style tag here. Same thing as this style attribute, but this one is style tag. And let's create another element inside our wrapper. So I'm going to create a button, and then inside this button I'm going to type submit me or click me. So now to style this button, remember how we created semantic HTML in the last video when we were talking about structuring your web page properly. I know that this is using divs, is not properly structured, but because we're focusing on CSS. So now to actually select our element, to actually style this element in the internal CSS, there's a convention, and this convention is a way by which we write CSS code in your HTML elements without having to embed it directly, and that's called the CSS rule. So the CSS rule allows you to, it has this convention where you have the selector and then a curly braces, then you have the property, and then you have the value. So this is the CSS rule that we're going to be applying in upcoming projects as we go on in this channel. So now, how do we style our button using this selector, this CSS rule? What is our selector? We want to style the button. So you select this particular name, button. That is what we're going to style. So you type button the same way. Button is the selector. The property is what styling property you want to select. So for this, the styling property here is color, and the value of color for this paragraph element is red. So for the button, we want to, for example, want to style the border. And what do we want to give this border? Let's give it 1 pixel, solid black. We'll talk about this also. So now you can see that the border changed here. If I comment this out, see that it was removed. So that is basically that about that. So the third type of CSS, the third type of way to style CSS is external CSS. External CSS is the most used type of way to style CSS. So now the use cases of these styling methods depends on the specific scenario. For example, if you are just want to style an element that needs a particular style and other elements does not need it. Like for example, you have different paragraphs on your web page and you just want to style just one paragraph. You can use inline CSS just for that particular paragraph element. But if your project is very small, like a relatively small project, and you want to have everything grouped together, you want to have your CSS and your HTML in the same file, then you can make use of the internal CSS. But mind you, this can become very, very unmaintainable. For example, you want to add to the code, it can become very bulky. So that's why we use something called external CSS. External CSS allows us to separate our CSS file from our HTML file. So how do we separate our CSS file from our HTML file? So to do that, you have to create your CSS file. And to do that, let's just create a new CSS file and name this style.css. So now in our style.css file, the way you write your CSS here is the same way you write it in the internal CSS, right? Only that it is separate from the HTML file. So we're just going to copy this and we're going to right click and click on copy. And then we're going to come here and right click and click on paste. So now it is the same method, it's not properly structured, but by hit save, see that it's moved in for me. So this is still the same convention applied in external that is applied in internal. So there's a terminology in CSS known as specificity. This is a concept that is very important, especially when it comes to writing styles in CSS. So the most specific style to a particular element is the inline style. Why? Because it is the closest to the element itself. So let's demonstrate this in code. So let me create a style. I have just one paragraph on my web page here. So I want to style this paragraph with inner, inline, internal, and external. Pay attention here. So now I can give this a color of blue, and in my external CSS I'll give it a color of yellow. That's for the paragraph. Remember the convention: selector, curly braces, property, then colon, value, then semicolon. So I'm going to give this color of yellow, and I'm going to hit save. So now remember, external CSS is not in the HTML file, so we need a way to connect our external CSS to our HTML document. So how do we do that? In our head tag, we have what we call the link tag. So basically, this link tag allows us to specify the source of where a link is coming from, where an external file. It allows us to link this particular HTML file to different external files, and it's not just CSS files alone, also CDNs, which is beyond the scope of this particular video. So now, how do we link this? We have what we call rel. So rel stands for relationship of a linked document to the current document, right? Of this particular linked document, that's the CSS file. So the relationship between our HTML file and CSS file is style sheet. And then we have href. Remember what we said about href in our HTML video? I'll leave a link in the description below for you to watch that HTML video where I talk about anchor tags. So we've created a CSS file, and it is in the same directory, the same folder as our HTML file. So we don't need to, specify much here. Just put a full stop and then a / to show that it is in the same directory, and then click save. So that is all. We've already linked our HTML file to our CSS file. I can add a comment here, linking CSS file to this HTML file, right? So now let's remove the inline style from here to see if the yellow color of that was given to our paragraph would reflect. If it reflects, that means that been linked correctly. So I'll hit on save. You see that it changes to blue because the next specific one is this, but we'll come back to that. Let's comment this out and hit on save. So the way I commented is that I highlighted everything and I clicked on control and /. So that's to comment your code. Same thing with HTML, but different. The way they are commented are different. So now you see that it's giving us yellow, and it's not really clear because yellow text in a white background, which is not really good, but just to show that the external CSS file is linked to our HTML file. So now the next thing that I'm going to be talking about, now that we've already discussed all the ways to style your CSS, is the text properties. So now for us to discuss text properties, this is a text, this paragraph, and we're going to be using inline CSS, external CSS, and internal CSS to talk about the 4 properties that we said we're going to talk about in this video. So I'm going to create a dummy text, and to do that, just type your paragraph in VS Code P, and it auto creates it for you. So let's add our style attribute, and let's add a color of brown. We've not put in any content yet, so we can't see anything. So we're going to put in dummy text here just to fill up. So times 12. So now we have some dummy text in there. Let me go back and do that again. Lorem times 12. So that's going to generate a lot of text for us. The text properties that we have is this color that we have here. That's for inline CSS. So basically, this color property changes, it sets the color of a text, and we can specify different values for it. Part of value is to specify the color itself. I can give this red, and it changes in real time. I can give this blue, and I control save, and then you can see everything is changing. So another way to select colors is what we know as RGB. So RGB basically stands for red, green, and blue, as you can see here. So red, green, and blue gives us, see, it's turning yellow because red plus green plus blue, I think, gives us yellow, if I'm not mistaken. So RGB, red, green, blue, you can specify the amount of redness of your text. So let's give it 90, and let's give this 67. That's our green. You follow the convention here, and then let's give this 80. So you can see it's giving us some kind of values here. So you can see that giving us some kind of values here. So basically, if you want to know how RGB works, RGB, each of the values, they range from 0 to 255, which makes it 256 in total. So you can change this to about 236, and change this, give this like 101. Just maybe specify your value. Let's say you have a specific color, and CSS, this the color property does not provide you the specific color, you can use this RGB to tweak things a little. So remember red, green, blue. Another color system in CSS is hexadecimal. So hexadecimal, this is how it looks. Hexadecimal starts from 0 and ends at F, everything all together making 16. So you can see that it's making use of the letters here, where you have 0 to 9 and you have A to F. So I can come here and change. This is the same thing as saying red, these two. Let me zoom in so you can see in. So now you can see this is the same thing as saying red, and then these two, this first two, same thing as saying red. This second, same thing as saying green, RGB, and then this one, same thing as saying blue, right? So the higher your hexadecimal color is, the more intense that particular part of your color is going to be. So for example, if I increase this, if I put this FF, that means I have more red. So now the second one is green. If I reduce this to about 0, 0, you can see that it has reduced a lot, right? I don't have any green at all. But if I increase the blue to like A and F, so I have a little bit of red and blue, which makes it purplish in color. So that's what RGB, that's how RGB is used. That's how hexadecimal is used. And you must always include your hashtag when you're using hexadecimal system for your colors. So now the next one that we're going to be talking about, let's over here and see which one. This one is known as HSL, which stands for hue, saturation, and lightness, right? Hue, saturation, and lightness. So basically this one ranges from here. This one has a long range. You can specify it to like about 320, and then this, the saturation, which has to do with the darkness and how thick it looks, and the lightness, which has to do with how bright it looks. Rather, saturation is how thick the color is, hue is the color itself, and then lightness is how bright the color is. So I can increase this to about 80. So you can just play around with these colors. The numbers, the color system you use, it doesn't matter. It depends on what is more convenient for you. Personally, I use just normal colors or hexadecimals because they allow me to specify my colors without having to write all this HSL, RGB, and all. So now that's colors. I'll just change it back to brown. So the next CSS property, text property that we're going to be looking at is line height. So line height now, basically line height allows you to set distance between lines in your text. So what that means, I want to set the distance between this top line and this bottom line, this top line and this bottom line. I use line height. Let's say that they are too close to each other and I want to give it a little bit. I can give it 1.5. So basically line height ranges from, you have 1, you have 1.5, you have 2, you have 2.5. So if you are familiar with Microsoft Word, you will notice that there's something called line height. There's also something called alignment of text. So everything is available in CSS too. So you can see when we give it 1.5 and we saved it, it's spacing it properly. So another text property is known as letter spacing. So letter spacing, line height is for vertical, letter spacing is for horizontal. It's how the letters are spaced away from each other. So now I can give this also 1.5, or sorry, 20% basically. So I can give this 20 pixels, and then you can see how very ugly it looks because I spaced it. 20 pixels is actually a lot for letter spacing. Usually you just have letter spacing of about, let's say, 5 pixels, and that's just, good enough, or rather 2 pixels. So you don't need to really add so much letter spacing, unless probably it's a specific design for that particular web page. So these are text properties, okay? So text properties are a lot, but then the most basic ones, the ones that we use the most, are the ones we've covered. And then there's another text property known as text align. So basically text align changes the position of your text horizontally. So what do I mean? You can either have your text centered like this, or you can have it to the left, aligned to the left. You can have it aligned to the right, and you can have it justified as well. So basically, if you are familiar with using desktop publishing tools like Microsoft Word or WPS, you will see something like text align. So basically, it's also available in CSS, where you can specify the alignment of your text, the position of your text horizontally. So that's the text property text align. Another Another text property that we have is known as text decoration. So text decoration basically allows us to add decoration to our text. Decorations such as dashes, dots, double, line through, overline, solid, underline. So the most common one here is underline, right? So you can see that all our text become underlined immediately. So that's basically text decoration. You can also change the color. If you see in this button that we created in our internal CSS, we added border of 1 pixel solid black. So we can also do the same for underline. So you can say 1 pixel underline and change the color to red. I see that the color changes. You can change it to blue to make it more obvious. I see that the color changes here. So that's that about text decoration. So now the last text property, but not limited to this last one, is known as text indent. So to indent a text is basically, for example, you are typing a letter. So indentation allows you, is like you are tabbing inside, you are creating space. You start writing on the next line, you're creating space, leaving space like a paragraph. So that's what indentation is all about. So you can indent this text. So you can give something like 20 pixels, which we're going to be talking about in the next video. Going to be talking about units, so as pixels and all those things. Okay, we can give it about 50 pixels, and you can see that it has indented. We've created a paragraph, an actual paragraph, right? And you can also change this and give like 20% of the screen, right? And you can see that it has indented already also. So that's what indentation is all about. So that's that about text properties. The next CSS properties, basic CSS property that we're going to be looking at, known as list properties. So now in our HTML video, we spoke about lists, and let's just create a simple unordered list. So quickly, and we're going to say list item 1. So now there's a shortcut to actually duplicate this list item, and on Windows, hold down Alt Shift and the down arrow, select this element, don't highlight it, Alt Shift and the down arrow. So basically, now that you've created the list, you can now change the list items, and if we scroll down here, we're going to see our list items here intact. So now we want to actually style this list. We want to style this list. So now the first list property, we're going to be using internal CSS for this one, since we used inline for the last. This might be a little disorganized, but it's just to show you how these styles can be mixed and when you should use them. So these list items, now we want to actually style this exact unordered list. So there's a way to select elements without having to use the element name, and we call these things selectors, as we described here in this convention. So we're going to see the first way is to use IDs, right? So we can give this a unique name. We can say unordered dash list. So that's the unique name for this particular element, right? So if we want to style this element, we don't need to be saying UL, because we can have a lot of ULs, right? And we want those the different ULs that we might have, we want them to have different styles. So that's why I created an ID unique to this particular one. So I'll highlight this and copy this. So after copying this, I'm going to paste it in this internal CSS place. So now that I've pasted it here, you can see that for example, let's give it color of red. You can see that nothing happened. It didn't change anything to our list items. Why? Because we've not actually specified that this is an ID. So to specify that this is an ID, there's a convention, and for IDs, when you select IDs in CSS, you use the hashtag first, and then you can see that it has changed to red. So that's how you specify IDs in CSS. So the other way to actually select elements, let's create an ordered list, OL. So now let's just copy all this. Now let's just copy all this, and then right click, copy in here inside this unordered list, because we want to select it in another way using the second way. So now these are unordered list. Now our ordered list, rather, we have the same list items, and you scroll down here, you see our ordered list here. So we want to change the color of the list items here using the second way of selecting elements without having to use the element name. So we have something called class. So classes are to be used when you want to style more than one element. So for example, I have another element having a class of, let's say, ordered list. right? Or let's just say list items, right? List items. So I can have another ordered list on this page that has the same class, list items. Whatever I give the style, whatever style I give list items will apply to the elements that have the class name of list items. So let me create another ordered list. So we're not going to make this one list items. We'll just say food 1. Okay, let's just give it real food. Let's say macaroni, and let's give this rice, and let's give this banana, right? So now you can see that this is another. So I want to change the color. I want to see if list items would respond to this particular elements together. So we have list items, right? So now we're going to copy this class, and then we're going to add it in our internal CSS here. So to paste it, we'll right click again, and then we'll paste. So now to style in the class, basically to select a class in CSS, you don't use it like this. For id it's hashtag, for class it's full stop, right? So now that selects the class. Any element that has this class to be, the style inside here will be applied to them. So let's give it color of let's give it green, right? So color is the most common one. Is consider everything happened all too quick. Everything happened and it's successful. So now the first list property that we're going to be looking at is known as list style. So list style sets all the properties for a list in one declaration. So basically, in one declaration simply means we're setting all the properties available to a particular list in one CSS property. So what does that mean? Let's try that. So now this is our unordered list, right? So we can type here and say list style. So now we can give list style. So this is how the convention goes. List style, we start with the list style type, which specifies the type of list item marker. The list style type specifies the type of list item marker. So let me type a comment here. So list style declaration. So at once you select, you're putting in all this at once. List style type, and then list style position, and then you're putting in the list style image after. So basically that's what you are putting in. So now let's choose the list style. Let's give it let's see what we can give it. Let's see the properties. Okay, let's give it circle. Now you can see that it has changed to circle here. We're styling the unordered list, right? So now the next one that we can style here is the list style position. So let's give the list style position outside. Okay, it's already outside. Let's give it inside, right? Now you can see that it has gone inside. So when you have a nested list item, you see the list property going inside like this. So now the next one that we can give, so you are following this declaration. So you don't have to be saying list style type separately, list style position. No, this is already a shortcut to just put everything inside following this declaration. So now the next one we're going to be putting is list style image. So we don't have an image currently. But when you want to select images in HTML and in CSS, you use the URL tag, and basically you just add in your image here, right? So that's how you do it. So now the next property we're going to be looking at is border. So that's all about lists basically, and you can also decide to hide the list style type, right? And you can put none, and then it's to just remove everything. So let's just undo that. So that's about list properties. So now the next CSS properties we're going to be looking at is border. I'm going to be using our button to add some border properties to our button. But first we're going to remove the style, the internal CSS style that we give to our button here. Sorry that it looks confusing. Let me zoom out a little. Okay, so now it looks clear. Now we have our web page here, we have our CSS up, and our HTML down. So now we're going to remove this style from this internal CSS inside the style tag here to demonstrate external CSS styling for our button. So now we've already selected our button here, and this one pixel solid black border still appears here. So now border properties in CSS are very complex. Actually, there are a lot. There are a lot of border properties, because border is a box model property, which we're going to be looking at in the next video in depth. But in this video, we're just going to be talking about a few border properties that we can use around a button. So generally, this is a shorthand property. This is a shorthand property. You can see shorthand property for setting border width, border style, and border color. So a shorthand basically combines different things together. That's what we looked at here in this list properties. So now let's remove this and specify the different border properties separately. So we have what we call border width. So border width has to do with how thick the border is. So I can give this, let's make it very thick, 10 pixels, right? You can see that by default it has increased, and the default border for this is inset. Basically the default border style for this is inset. Inset is like a real button that allows you to click it. That's what inset is, but that's not what we're using. So now that's border width. Another border property that we have is border style. So basically border style allows us to specify the type of border that we want to have. So now let's say dotted for our button. Now you can see this is not really good. It doesn't look good for a button, but let's just give it the normal solid, which gives it a very good border around it, right? And let's reduce the width 5 pixels. Yeah, that's okay for the border. So now we have another border property, which is the final one for the shorthand. We have it to be border color. So now let's give this border color a color of brown as the previous ones. So now you can see our button having a border of brown. So let me zoom in here in my web page. So now you can see the border color is brown, the border width is 5 pixels, and the border style is solid. So what if we want to have rounded corners, right? We don't want our borders to be having our button to be having sharp edges. There's also a border property known as border radius. So border radius basically deals with how it defines the radius of the outer border edge. Basically deals with how the curve of the border edges, right? So we can give this 25 pixels, right? So pixels, is best to use pixels because pixels are like the most foundational units. We'll talk about all this in depth in the next video, basically, which we'll talk about box model and units. So that has specified our border radius basically of 25 pixels. Another border property that we have is we can specify each of the border separately. We have the left side. We can specify the left side border separately. We can specify the top side border separately. We can specify the right side border separately. We can also specify the bottom side border separately. So let's start with border left. So we can say border left, and border left can also have, like, it has everything here. It has border left width, border left radius, border left color. So let's put border left width first, and let's give it a width of 2 pixels and see that it has actually reduced. And then we can have border left style, border left style. So let's give this dashed, right? Dashed, sorry, let's give it dashed, and you can see now it actually has the dash here. If you zoom in properly, you can see the dash. So the last one is border left color. We're not going to be doing radius, but let's just do border left color. Let's give this a color of blue, right? And you can see the dashed is blue already. So you can do the same. You can just type border. You can also do the same, border right color. Let's give it a color of black, right? The normal color. You can see black. So now let's also add for the top. So we can say border top width, and I can give it 10 pixels just to see. Now you can see that it has actually changed 10 pixels. So now this is a bonus section, but I mean this is a very basic property that I'm about to say now. So we're going to talk about background colors in a bit. So now background colors basically it allows you to add colors to a specific element, and then we have background that allows you to add different background properties to your HTML document. So let's create an empty div and give it a background color, and also give our body, the whole page, a background color as well. So let's create a div here. Let's give this div a class, right? A class, because we can have a lot of other divs that will have the same class. So let's say background, okay, no, let's just say unique div no, not in unique div. Let's see, special divs. Yeah, sorry, I'm changing the name. Special divs, right? So basically, these special divs will have special properties that we're going to be adding. So let's copy this, and then in here in our external CSS, let's paste it. And remember, to select divs in each CSS, you specify the hashtag and name of the div of the to specify classes. Sorry, to specify classes is full stop. My bad. So now that's for classes, full stop, and then the name of the class. So now we're going to give this a background color of, let's give it a background color of gold. This is very color rioting, but just to show you how CSS can be used. We're building more realistic projects as we go on. So now I see that the div did not show, right, by just setting background because it is empty. How about we put some content inside this div? We called it an empty div, right? But let's put some content. Let's put lorem times 10, and then immediately you're going to see lorem times 10 with the div of gold. So let's just say paragraph, since we have a paragraph inside. All right, so the only way this would work, the only way this color would work, let's say black, is when you have text directly inside. So this is paragraph text, right? So let's say I don't put any paragraph or any element, I just put this is a div text. It is this div text that will have color of black as well, because directly I'm setting it here, right? If I change it to blue, you can see that it's also changed. So but it's good practice to always put HTML elements inside a div, right, and not just text content. Okay, there's one more, background. Yeah, background. So basically, background is a shorthand. It's a shorthand for setting most of the background properties at the same place in the style sheet. So we have what we call background image, background color, background position, and all those things. So we don't have any image, right? But let's download an image. So to download an image, there's a website known as Unsplash. So basically, on splash.com, they have high quality images that you can use to get for your website if you don't have images for that particular thing yet. So now let's just search for a very simple image. We're going to type HTML, or we're just going to type CSS rather. This is more similar to what we're doing. So click on download. So now I'm going to be saving it in the same directory, in the same folder as where we stored our CSS, right? Now we already have our image downloaded, and here it is. You can view your image in your VS Code. So this is the image that we downloaded, right? We're going to be using this image as a background image for this div, right? So I'm going to remove all this text once the image displays to avoid any clustering. So to select background image in your CSS. So now don't be confused. Just quick notice, don't be confused that I what do you say? So now don't be confused that I separated everything, that I'm using inline, external, inline, internal. I'm just trying to explain the whole concept and using the 3 methods of styling to show you that you can use any one you want to use depending on the context of your application, as I said earlier. So now to select your image for background, you can say URL, and this URL basically specifies the link, the path. That's where your image is stored, and the image is stored directly in our folder as the same as the CSS file. So that's the full stop / select the image, and that's all. So basically you can see that the image has loaded. Let's remove the text, right? Let's see. Let's leave only the div text. Let's leave only the div text. So we'll remove this paragraph. Remove this paragraph, cancel it, right? Let's remove the whole paragraph and leave this div text inside. All right, so now there's something I want to explain to you. So basically, when you are dealing with images, background images in CSS, the length of the text or the length of the div will determine the length of the image, right? So for example, let's say we now give this div an height of 500 pixels and we save. you can see that it has increased basically, and the image is showing, but the image is zooming in so much, the resolution has been affected. So there's a way you can actually set the resolution, and we're going to use this background property to do it. So now that we've already set our URL, right, the next thing we need to do is we can actually set another property known as this is what the shorthand is: background. You have background image, you have background position, you also have background color, and you have background size. Okay, background repeat, you have background size. So that's that about that. So each of these values separately, let's just add them in. Yeah, you can put background of top, right? You can put background color of red, but there is no need for background color since we have an image. You can put background repeats, no repeats. That means the image should not be repeated, no matter how small it is. So if we look at that, you can see that the image is already coming to shape. Now you can see that when you save, it's not still showing the image clearly. So to actually fix the resolution of this image, there's a background size property that works with the background position. So you just put a / and then the background property, you can specify it to be cover, you can specify it to be contain. We'll be discussing all this in depth when we look at specific CSS concepts, but just know that this cover actually gives it the full resolution even within the specified height or width. Contain makes it contain shrinks it basically. It doesn't shrink it so much, but contain just gives it a, you can say it gives it the normal resolution, how it's supposed to be within that particular div, and that's why we now have repeat. So if you want to turn off this repeat for this particular image, we can just say no repeat, which is background repeat as specified here. So you can hit or save, and then you can see it only has just this one element, just this one image. So let's change that back to cover, right? So that's background property. So now the last CSS property that we're actually going to be looking at is font properties, right? So basically font properties. What are font properties? What are fonts? Basically, font is how text is represented on your web page, such as if you can have the font size, you have the font style, you have the font width, how bold it is, how not bold it is, how light it is, how normal it is. Basically, that's what you use fonts to, you know, change font properties to change all those things. So now the first font property we'll be talking about, let's create a new HTML. Okay, let's create a new HTML element. Let's give this paragraph, and then let's give this paragraph a class of font paragraph, right? Font paragraph here. So now we're putting lorem ipsum text inside here as well. I mean, we have a lot of lorem ipsum. Just give us quick text times, let's put times 5. This one is smaller, so that'll be under this place here. All right, so this is the text we're dealing with for font properties, right? So the first font property we're looking at is font family. So let's select this particular element that has a class of font paragraph, and we use a class, so it's full stop, and then we say font paragraph. Remember, font paragraph. So let's just close this so it will be more convenient, and then we're ready to write our styles. All right, so now inside font paragraph, I want to give it a font family. So font family basically has, font family is a special property that allows us to change the way the font looks, and CSS already has default font family properties such as font family values such as Arial, Cabria, Georgia, but sometimes, most times, you actually have to install your own fonts from Google Fonts or any of those font providers like that. So now in this tutorial, we're going to be using the pre-inbuilt ones. So the one I used to use for a start before I install my fonts is Arial. And if you save this document, you see that the fonts will change. The font of this particular paragraph has changed. It's different from this one here, right? So this is Arial font. That's what the font family says. So the convention for this font family is the family name, right? So you can search for more information online from Google Fonts, basically when you want to download your font. So you can go there and just, you know, navigate yourself around there. It's very easy to download, but we're focusing on the properties itself. So this is how Google Font is. Let me put a full screen here. Let's say you want to download the font. So let's download the font. Basically, let's download the font and make use of it. So now to download, let's try this Mathemacy, right? So you just click on Mathemacy and then click on Get Fonts. So you can either download it or just get the embedded code. So we're using embedded code. So this is what I meant by CDNs, right? You can just copy this and then paste it into your HTML file. We're just going to copy this CSS class and then right click and click on copy and then move this back to the right where it was. So we're going to, under here, we're going to paste the CSS class containing those fonts. So we want to give this Mathemacy regular class inside this paragraph. Alright, so that's very easy way to insert your fonts that you just downloaded. Even without downloading, you can just insert here, provided you are connected to the internet. So it won't take the area font again, it's now going to take Mathemacy -regular. And if we save, you can see it's not really showing for us here, right? Because we did not copy the link, right? So let's copy this CDN. I'll highlight it and right click. There's actually a copy button there. You just copy the code and then come to your HTML elements and your HTML documents where it is here, and then paste it here in the head, right? Before the styling, before the styles. Click on paste and then there you go. You can save it and you should have your font load. The Mathemacy fonts should have it load now. Alright, we kept a full stop. That's another mistake that we made. So if we click on save, you're not meant to put full stop in class unless you're using CSS. You can see that the Mathemacy has been selected. So basically that's font family property. Alright, so now the next font family property that we're going to be looking at for this paragraph is known as font size. So from the name font size, it simply means it changes how large or how small our fonts are. So since we're using pixels, the default font size for every HTML element is 16 pixels, and 16 pixels is basically the general for everything here. So if you want to change it, if you want to increase it, you can just come here and say 20 pixels for that particular paragraph, and you can see that it has increased. You can see 30 pixels and you can see that it has increased. So let's return it back to 20 pixels. And you can see that it has decreased back to 20 pixels. So the next font property that we're going to be looking at is known as font style. So font style basically changes how our fonts look, not the family, not the font itself, but how our font look. Is it italic? Is it normal? Is it oblique? So we can give it something like italics. Remember in the first video we spoke about italic text, we spoke about emphasized text, strong text. So you can actually set the font style in this particular way where you can change it to italics. So basically this font that we downloaded does not allow for italics, but if we change it here and put style, we put italics here, italic, it's actually going to change, right? You can see that it has changed to italics. So that's for font style. Okay, let's work with this Mathemacy. So now the last font property we're going to be looking at is font width. And font width actually allows us to control the thickness of our font for that particular text. So font width, it ranges from 100 to 900. So 100 being the lightest one, 900 being the thickest. So let's give it 600, and you can see that it becomes thicker. Let's give it 200, and you can see that it becomes the normal way it was, right? The normal way it was. Alright, oh sorry, we're already setting font width here. So 200 might not be available on this particular font, but you get the idea. So if you want a very thick font, you can just come here and select and set the font weight to be equal to 200. So that's that about this video. A quick recap on everything we spoke about. We spoke about CSS and what it is. the different type of properties, basic properties we have in CSS, such as the text properties, to the list properties, to the border properties, and finally we spoke about the font properties. So that's a wrap for this video. In the next video, we're talking about units, positioning, and the box model. Thank you very much, and subscribe.